On behalf of the Random Review Committee, we would like to welcome all of you here on this lovely day, and we would like to extend particular thanks to John Larison for agreeing to review Mink River. John's really busy between teaching and his fly fishing business, and he's the father of a family of 3 young children. I'd like to tell you that Mink River is written by Brian Doyle, who is a Lake Oswego writer, editor, and poet, and it was published in the fall of 2010. And it's the first original novel published by the Oregon State University Press. Full disclaimer here, I'm the acquisitions editor at the OSU Press. We published it in the fall of 2010, and Mink River is now in its 5th printing and has sold over 12,000 copies, which is really good for everyone concerned. I'd like to share some information with you about John, some of which is taken from his fly fishing guiding website. It's a really beautifully written website, even if you're not a fly fisher person, so I would encourage you to look at it. Anyhow, it starts by saying, the first Larisons arrived in Oregon in the mid-1800s and settled in the very watersheds John Larison continues to fish today. Steelheading by age 7, fly fishing by age 8, John grew up immersed in feathers and chrome. Well, this prompted me to ask John if he started writing when he was 7 and 8, and he said no, he began writing when he was 21, but he didn't begin writing in earnest until he was 25. John now teaches literature and writing in OSU's School of Writing, Literature, and Film. He's a river steward for the Native Fish Society. He's a fly fishing guide, and he's the Northwest field editor for Fly Fisherman magazine. He's the author of a best-selling how-to book, which some of you may be familiar with, entitled The Complete Steelheader. And he is a frequent contributor to numerous outdoor magazines, including Fly Rod and Reel, The Drake, Fly Fish Journal, and Gray's Sporting Journal. But those are not the main reasons we invited John to review the book, although that's part of it. John is also a novelist. His first novel, entitled Northwest of Normal, was praised by the Denver Post as a first-rate contribution to the novels of the West. His most recent novel, Holding Lies, has been praised by reviewers, including the New York Journal of Books, which described John's prose as worthy of comparison to that of Jim Harrison, Howard Frank Mosher, and Michael Ondaatje. John now lives in Corvallis with his wife and 3 young children and is working on, yes, his 3rd novel. Please welcome John Larison.
Hello.
Cord issues. Oh, let's see if I can hit you in the face.
I'll try to stand still here. There we go. Thank you all for coming. I was a little apprehensive at first, agreeing to review a book that I hadn't read. But Mink River arrived quickly in my mailbox, and I cracked the first page and knew I was going to like this book. How many of you have read it? Oh, terrific. Excellent. If you haven't read it, maybe my thesis today is why you might want to pick it up and give it a read. So first I thought I would start with the critical reception of this book. As Mary said, it's selling really well, considering it's takes place in Oregon. I think there are 12,000 readers in Oregon. It feels that way sometimes. And really, online, if you look at a site called Goodreads, which is a place where people often comment on books they've read, this book has fans all over the country. People who have really fallen in love with it, and giving it 5-star ratings, which is the highest rating. So it's for being 2 years out, it really has a lot of momentum, it seems. And some of you might know it was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award this year as well. So the Oregonian praised it in this way. The writer said, "The greatest gift of Mink River is that it provides every reason in the world to see your own village, neighborhood, and life in a deeper, more nuanced, and connected way." And that was certainly one of my experiences with the book. I'm going to show some passages today and talk about how the book actually makes us, or helps us make the connection between people in the language on the page. And really, I think this is among the highest praise a novel can receive. after finishing this book, this praise promises, you're going to see your own village differently, your own life differently. And I think that's why I read fiction personally, is because at the end of a novel, if it's a good novel, I put it down and I look around and everything seems brighter, clearer. As Brian Doyle writes, everything was white and blue. Yeah, which that seems about right somehow. David James Duncan said that this book is an unprecedented delight. And he was talking specifically about how this book is really about Irish culture on the north coast of Oregon and native culture on the north coast of Oregon and the intersection between the two. And you might think, okay, it's about Europeans coming, or it's about a place where Europeans have come and the native culture has been a long time. It's going to be a book about conflict. But it's not about conflict really at all. Somehow it's a novel that works without there being big fights in it. Although there certainly is some tension in the novel. So I thought one of my favorite parts about the book was how it seemed to put words to things that I feel about the Northwest. Put words to it, and by that I mean it helped me articulate things about the Northwest that I love. And one of those moments comes on page 15 for anyone who has a book with them. And I'll just go ahead and read it. And really, every page has one of these moments for me, especially when we're learning about the areas where the river connects to the ocean, and where the land connects to the river. Brian Doyle spends a lot of time talking about these locations and about people moving through these locations, and he just describes them really well. But here's a moment that I thought was really talking about the Northwest and what makes all of us different. Maybe the reason many of us have chosen to live here. But we also are prey to what I might call a vast and overweening ambition. I mean, really, to preserve history, collect stories, repair marriages, prevent crime, augment economic status, promote chess, manage insect populations, run sports leagues. Isn't that a bit much? Yeah. I mean, we in the Northwest, we all seem to be overly inspired some way, at least overly when compared to other people around the nation. And I think one of the gifts of this book is that it shows us that inspiration, that ambition, really comes from the ground. We live in a rich place, full of salmon, full of berries, and everyone here really, I think, grows from that fertility, to have fertile ideas of their own. So, argument one, read it because it'll make you see the Northwest differently. And if you do read it, if you haven't read it, you might be overcome by the strange style of the book. I see heads nodding, which means that probably some of you were overcome. And, to be perfectly honest, there were moments in the book where, before I was seeing what the voice was about, where I thought I might put the book down because the voice was demanding so much. It was. I'm going to read some of these passages, but really, the voice is showing us something, I think. Writing advice, the advice writing teachers give their students all the time is show, don't tell. And what this book proves, I think, is that the voice can show us something in its style. And so ultimately, looking back on the book, I find these places where I found the voice challenging, and I look at them now and I realize that the voice there has to be that way. This isn't pyrotechnics or something. It needs to be that way. And so really we're going to, one of the things I hope to do today is look at some of these places and talk about the voice. And I was hoping to have an overhead here, But I forgot to make transparencies of the page. So I'm going to be doing some showing, and we'll just do the best we can. So maybe right before I dive into the voice, I should just say this book doesn't have just one protagonist. Most novels have a protagonist. We follow that protagonist. Maybe we see some other perspectives, but the story is really about one person or a family. This book is really about 50 people, and everybody is treated equally in the narration. Some people get more page space, but we know everyone in the same tender, generous way. There's a lack of judgment, really, in the narration. So, as I said, it's about the connection between the Irish and the natives on the coast, and it's really also about love and stories, time and stories, love and courage, and I think that it's also about learning to accept our burdens and move forward in an optimistic way. So I'm going to start talking about the voice on page 13. And I'm going to look at a paragraph here. It's the third full paragraph down. And I'll just tell you about it because we don't have the overhead. There's an absolute lack of punctuation in this paragraph. No punctuation. In fact, there's no capitalization in it. The paragraph begins with a conjunction, which I was taught never, ever, ever to do. And as you'll see, something happens because of these craft decisions. Something happens to us as we read it. We feel something that we wouldn't feel if there had been punctuation. All right. Now, you're going to want me to pause so you can process it all. And I think that's part of the experience. And over a grocer grocering a priest, priesting a doctor, doctoring teachers, teaching two cooks, cooking a man beating his son, an insurer insuring a woman vomiting in a creek, a banker banking an old nun's heart faltering in her room on the top floor of the hotel, a man telling a lie in court, a teenage couple coupling on top of the blankets in the downstairs bedroom of her parents' house so as to be sure that no rumpled sheets will tell tales of their vigorous unclothedness. So you might have noticed that I had a hard time figuring out where to stop. Like, where does one idea stop and the other begin? To ask you the question, what was your experience hearing that? That's an impossible question to answer, probably. If you imagine this paragraph being written with periods between each idea, and new subjects and new verbs in each one, you can probably imagine what that would feel like, because that's the kind of reading that we do all the time. How was this different, do you think?
Like a list. It sounded like a list.
Like a list?
Yeah.
And, okay, so, right, okay. What is the list? Can you help me make sense of that? I think I'm totally agreeing with you.
I never figured out what it was a list of.
That's good, yeah. That actually might get right to the heart of the question right there. Yeah.
Well, it's about everything that's happening in the community at that moment, and it just ties them together, and it shows how everything is all related. And it's kind of a foreshadow of the way the book works.
Okay, so you've read the book.
But yeah.
Absolutely connecting people together, and your experience of it. Did people have a hard time sorting out who was who? No, some people. Okay. When I read it, and I think when I read it here out loud, there are moments when I didn't know when to pause. I didn't know where one idea started and another stopped. And isn't that really like community? If you think about community not from your own vantage point, but from sort of the raven's point of view up above. We all bleed together, right? So this is a moment, this is a single, it's a list from within a giant sentence that goes on for a long time, very Faulknerian. And this is on page 13, and moments like this continue through most of the book, but especially the first half. When this technique is used later in the novel, though, I think we get a clearer sense of what Doyle is really up to. I'm going to read a passage from page 61. 161. So we have an 18-year-old named Rachel, she was the person who was having unclothed fun in that earlier passage. And we also have another character who is in, I'm forgetting now, I believe she's 39, though I could be wrong about that. Her name's Sarah. She's the wife of the police officer in town. And I think that's all we need to know, but I'll just tell you. Rachel and Sarah are both pregnant, and they both have just realized this. Rachel, walking home from work at the old shingle factory near the old sawmill, worries about missing her period. Sarah, the wife of Michael, the cop, feels a flutter in her belly when she kneels to plant the pole beans. Rachel tries to stay calm and count the days before, during, and after. Sarah throws up behind the little row of white cedar saplings. Rachel walks faster and faster. Sarah gets a shovel and buries her vomit and scatters leaves and sticks over it for good measure. Rachel walks in her house and says, "Mom? Mom?" And hearing no reply, goes straight to her mom's bedroom and gets her mom's desk calendar, the one with the holy days marked in blue, and counts the days since. Sarah kneels again and plants the beans in 5 long rows. Rachel hears her mother coming from up from the basement and hurriedly puts the calendar back and goes to the closet and pretends to be rooting around for shoes. Sarah thinks a row for each of us if I keep this child. Rachel grabs 2 shoes and runs down the stairs and runs into the bathroom and throws up in the sink. Sarah feels the flutter again in her, but it feels like bubbles this time. Rachel flushes the toilet to cover the sound of her gagging. Sarah's daughters pat down the soil over the beans with their fingers, small and gentle and active and dirty and lively as earthworms. Rachel's mother passes the bathroom door on her way upstairs with an armful of laundry up to her eyeballs, and she hears the plumbing humming, and she says, "Rachel?" Sarah's daughters throw dirt clods at each other. "Out in a minute, Mum," says Rachel, rinsing out the towel with which she cleaned the sink. Sarah's daughters wander off behind the house, and Sarah, on her hands and knees in the dirt, watches them go. Rachel watches her face and pinches her cheeks to get her color back. Sarah presses her hand against her belly. Rachel slips out the back door and runs down the street just as Sarah stands up in her garden. She sees Rachel flash past as leggy and free as a young deer, and Rachel sees Sarah as strong and wise as the sea. All one paragraph. We have periods and commas that time. But what was the effect for you that time? Why do you think Doyle did that? Yeah.
More storytelling. It's more of a storytelling style.
Oh, can you? What do you mean by that storytelling style?
Because you're following those 2 people in a more linear fashion, a little more linear.
Okay, and by storytelling, do you mean like verbal storytelling, like sitting around a fire? Yeah. I think you're right. This book has an omniscient narrator, which is often the way we tell a story when we're, telling children's stories or sitting around a campfire and telling stories. And yeah, absolutely. What else? Why else do you think Doyle might have done it in that way, written it in that way? Yeah.
Well, they feel connected, except they see each other so differently.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful, that last image? Absolutely. It's all one paragraph. and we're alternating back and forth. And there comes a moment right there. Sarah's daughters throw dirt clods at each other. "Out in a minute, Mom," says Rachel. Right there, we blur the two. And the two become one for a second. And then in that last moment that's so beautiful where they see each other, we see how they see each other so differently. And that's how I feel like I experience community. I often just see the differences and not see really the powerful, more powerful connections. So I would argue the voice of the book, I want to come back to your point about being foreshadowing. I was curious there. But I see the voice here as being absolutely necessary to what the book is ultimately about, I think. And more than necessary, because necessary can be boring, I see this voice as really compelling. It was challenging, just like Mount Hood might be challenging for Worried Man later in the novel as he climbs Mount Hood. But it takes that challenge to make the reward as big as it can be. We have to earn our reward, I feel like. Okay. Do you remember, sir, your point about foreshadowing?
Not entirely.
No, okay. I should have asked you in that moment.
It touches on a lot. That paragraph touches on really. It says, okay, here's some. It talks about the guy lying in court. It really introduces you to the people and what they're doing at that moment, and sets up all these different threads that go through.
Absolutely, yeah. And in each of these moments where there's other moments like when the rain falls and we see the rain falling on each character, Doyle gives us these updates every few pages about everyone and showing us the ways that we're all connected. The rain falling on us, another point, everyone's on their knees, kneeling. And we learn about everyone in these moments. And often we lose the punctuation, we lose the divisions, and everybody starts to blur. And in my memory of the novel, maybe yours is the same way if you've read it, there are distinct characters, but really the center of the novel is not in a person for me, which is strange because the center of most contemporary novels is in a person. The center of this novel is really in this town in Oregon, the city center, really. Maybe it's the doctor's house, maybe it's the public works building, maybe it's the bar, but it's somewhere in there. It's none of those places, and it's all those places. One more place I was hoping to read and talk about the voice, page 200. And this is page 200, the full section there. Now we get, this is a section where I think the voice is showing us something different, but it's showing us something still. And as you can see, hopefully it's tiny, I know, we have a big paragraph, and then we have one-sentence paragraphs. And what you can't see is that some of these words, some of these sentences are one word long. And we might ask ourselves why, right? But so I'm going to read this and just see, just feel the effect of this structure, this punctuation, and if that's not enough, think about how it would feel different if it was written conventionally. Today was packing day at the shingle factory, and Rachel has glue in her hair, splinters in both hands, sawdust in her eyes, and the smell of cedar in and on and through her from tip to toe. Generally, she loves the smell of cedar, such a sharp, friendly smell. But on packing day at the factory, she hates the smell of cedar, and she wants it off her. And it's such a crisp, warm day, and the river looks so clean and inviting that she walks briskly up past the school to where a bend in the river makes the cool pool, a haven in the dog days of summer. And there she shucks her clothes in about 1/8 of a second and slips in easily. She loves water and the river and swimming, the feeling of moving water against her skin, The water is a lot colder than she expected, but rivetingly clear, and she lazes and luxuriates and ruminates and meditates, her whole body submerged except for her nose and eyes. A thrush pipes. A baby, she thinks. A robin whinnies. Timmy's baby. The salmonberry bushes ringing the pool quiver in the nervous breeze. My son. In the distance, the log trucks shiver the highway. My daughter. She dives into the bottom of the pool. Our son or daughter. She holds on to the patient rocks at the bottom of the pool and faces upstream into the current. My poor mama. She surges into the surface for air. But I don't have to have the baby. She dives down to the bottom again. I could make an appointment somewhere. A trout whirls past her face. I wouldn't have to tell Mama. A crawdad pokes his head out from under the rock she's holding. Poor Mama. And one thing to notice about these passages before we talk about them is notice the salmonberry bushes ringing the pool quiver in the nervous breeze. In the distance, log trucks shiver the highway. Right? Nobody ever describes things like that, right? We describe them in some other way, and yet this description is accurate. And doesn't it make us see things differently? Think of the pool as a bell, and the salmonberry bushes like ringing it, or like a drum in some way. So I don't know what to make of that, but I noticed it as I was reading it. But so as you can see here, each one of these is a new paragraph. And what strikes me so much about this writing, this voice, is Doyle is not worried about, is this a proper sentence? You know, he's really not concerned about that. He's concerned about conveying emotion to us in language. And he is so good at doing that with his punctuation, with his paragraphing, with his decisions about what's capitalized, where one idea becomes really two blurred ideas. For instance, here when Rachel runs down to the water, there's no break in the ideas between her taking off her clothes and she loves water and the river and swimming. Her taking off the clothes is fused, that idea, to her love of the water and the river. And isn't that your own experience? You know, if you like run down to the water to take your clothes off and jump in, that's really all one feeling, isn't it? There's no, I like water, I'm going to take off my clothes and get in, right? And so, about this voice, it's challenging in places, but it really conveys emotion that couldn't be conveyed if the voice looked different, I feel like. Yes, sir?
Well, the other thing that I noticed is he changes the voice. The beginning of it, where they have the long paragraph, he's describing what's happening, and then she takes over, and it's her voice that you hear.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, the literary term is free indirect voice. We go from an omniscient point of view, and it's the camera. If you imagine the narration as a camera, it's above, and it slowly slides down until it's inside Rachel's head. Not looking at Rachel doing things anymore, but actually inside her head, describing things as she's seeing them. And here's a crawdad head pokes its head out from under the rock she's holding. Right? She's holding it. There's this head that pops out. And her next thought, poor Mama. And doesn't that reveal so much about how consumed she is with this decision, that it's going back and forth like that? And Doyle really moves supplely from that omniscient voice into characters' heads. I think that's why he can pull this book off and no one else can, is that we go from being omniscient And by omniscient, I really mean that voice outside of heads, outside of minds, looking down on people, to being inside people, in a phrase, sometimes without even a comma. I'm sure I would like to ask him if he was aware of those movements, or if he was really able to occupy kind of both spaces at once as he wrote. So the book uses this voice, I think, to accomplish something something I've never read or seen accomplished elsewhere. As I said, I thought this book was about, love and stories, and stories and time, and love and courage. And really, at the end of this book, I was left thinking hard about all these issues and the connections between these issues, the connections that I hadn't seen before. There's a phrase that pops up all the time in here, which I think is an Irish phrase. Time is a storyteller. And that's one that I still can't get to the bottom of. But I really feel that there's something going on in there, something profound. And I'm sure if you read this book, you probably walked away with it with some idea brewing, feeling some connection, and not having the words for it yet. One of those for me, which I spent a lot of time thinking about, appears on page 315. And this is near the very end, and so not to give anything away, I'm only going to read a small piece and not tell you what's going on. Though I will tell you that the character's name is Moses. Moses says, "Stories are not words, you know. Words are just the clothes that people drape on stories." Yeah. So if stories aren't words, what are they?
Experiences.
Experiences? Okay.
That's like saying that the community isn't just a collection of people.
And say more.
Well, the first paragraph, when you talked about looking down on all these people, and it's not really, a community isn't really made up just of a collection of individuals. It's the individuals plus their connections to each other, their relationships, their interactions. And it sounds like this is another take on that a story is more than just words. It's feeling and experience and different ways of seeing things.
Uh-huh.
It's not as simple as just words. Just like a community is not simply a group of people.
Yeah, nice. Well said. Yeah. Another passage for you that I think is connecting directly to the one that I just read. Stories are not only words, words are just the clothes that people drape on stories. This other passage is on page 119, the top of the page. Sometimes I think that all people in all times must have had the same joys and sorrows, says Nora. Everyone thinks that the old days were better or that they were harder, and that modern times are chaotic and complex, or easier all around. But I think people's hearts have always been the same, happy and sad, and that hasn't changed at all. It's just the shapes of lives that change, not the lives themselves.
Who says that?
That's Nora, who her other name is No Horses. Yeah. So, did you see any connection there between the words are just clothes on stories? Yeah.
I think the whole book is about experiences that everybody has,
experiences. They have these experiences. But everybody's perception is slightly different because of their point of view. There are connections because the experiences may be similar, such as two women being pregnant, but their perception of what's happening and their reactions to it are just totally different. And that seems to me one of the things that people need to work on, so that you understand somebody else may think differently than you do.
Yeah, you mean that we should work on as a community?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet Doyle would agree. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, it seems to me that he's maybe making some other connections there too, and I'm kind of just thinking on my feet, which I'm not very good at, but neuroscientists are telling us now that our identity, ourselves, are really just a narrative that we sort of make up about the things that have happened. We construct our identities out of the things that have happened to us. And so that's sort of the clothes that we put on our story of ourselves, and it is applicable to the bigger picture, to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally. I think that's the premise of the novelist, is that that people are the narratives they construct, the narratives that feature them as the hero, really, and that's how we come to a sense of ourselves, is through that crafting of a story about ourselves. Yeah, thanks for that. That's it. You're good at thinking on your feet. Any other connections that you're feeling between those two passages? Okay, I have another one for you then. And actually, maybe before we move on to that other one, let me just say a couple words about this one. People's hearts have always been the same, happy and sad. That hasn't changed at all. It's just the shapes of the lives that change, not the lives themselves. If we think about, I'm in an English department, and there are many people in the English department who are teaching books and have taught books their whole lives by authors who have been dead so long that there's really very, we have no idea what the authors looked like, no idea what the author's last name might have been, what the author's real name might have been, and yet we're still reading those stories. The Old Testament, this book is filled with biblical allusion. We still talk about these stories, I think, because we see ourselves somehow in these stories. Stories, as an English professor I had, stories are time travel, is what he used to say, which I think is absolutely true. But also, stories are timeless, I think Doyle would say. It's not about traveling. It's about realizing that time might be a myth, that there might not be time. I'm going way out, sorry. That's a whole different 5 hours. The language changes, but the stories stay the same, maybe. Yeah.
Talking about time, I go back to the first thing you read, where everything was happening at the same time. And so time goes away as you read parts of this because he's got everything kind of superimposed on each other.
Yeah, terrific.
The connections are timeless in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. What is a comma or a period if not a break in time? That's a great point. Thank you for that. So on page 21, a last passage for you. And when I read this passage, my first time through the book, I underlined it because I had a feeling it was going to be significant. And then when I got to the end of it, I often do this, when I read a book, I make notes as I go through, and then I get to the end, and I come back and look at my notes. And that, I feel like, really helps me figure out what's going on. And so after I came back to this passage, though, I realized that, oh my gosh, somehow this passage seems like it could be the key to unlocking what's going on here with the story, and the close on stories and people, lives changing but not changing. Maybe thinking about it now, We are trying to figure out how to make love in such a way as not to make time matter at all, or defeat it for a while. I know the words make love, literally are about something, right? That the unclothed fun. Certainly that's what they are in this moment. That's what, literally is going on in that moment. But so many of the characters here, there's a character named Daniel, and Daniel is the grandson, right? And most of the story belongs to a character named Worried Man, who's Daniel's grandfather. And throughout the story, the grandfather and Daniel's father are relaying stories into a tape recorder, like this one, and presumably to give to Daniel, right? And in the end, Daniel tells his own story. But after reading that passage, maybe thinking about it now, we were trying to figure out how to make love in such a way as not to make love in such a way as to make time not matter at all, or defeat it for a while. I started to wonder if maybe what is under stories is really love. And if it's not love that we're sharing when we tell these stories, because certainly that's what's going on between Daniel and his grandfather. That grandfather tells him the old stories, and he's sharing love. He's sharing not just a concept of who Daniel is, where Daniel comes from, giving Daniel that narrative of himself, that story of himself, but he's also sharing something much deeper than that. And so ultimately, I think, if stories are love, and if love is stories, thinking about this, I'm thinking on my feet now. Here, excuse me. But this is happening in a spousal relationship. This moment is coming, in moment between Worried Man and his lady, what is it that spouses share besides, the obvious love? Like we say we love, our partner. They're really sharing a narrative, right? This is how we met. This is how we fell in love. This is the story of our marriage. This is the story of our lives. And isn't it that story that unites? Maybe that's an argument for stories being love. And I think also this book is about what goes away when someone dies and what doesn't go away. And definitely those stories stay. Right? The love stays. Right? And really, this book proves that in a community, we share stories. We are a story. We just have to see it right. We have to step outside of ourselves. We have to do like Doyle. That sounds like a bracelet. And think about not just how we, Rachel, see Sarah, but also about how we are so similar. Similar patterns, similar stories, different vehicles for story. Right. So I was going to leave time to open it up for questions if anybody had questions. And maybe the right way to prompt questions is to ask those of you who read it about confusions maybe you had or troubles that you had while you were reading it. Often those confusions, those troubles lead to questions, and often those questions, I think, help us unlock stories. Yes?
I think this is a book that can be read and reread. I was an English minor, and I read it some, and I put it down and thought, oh no. And then I read it more and more. And does Brian Doyle always write in the same style?
Yes.
He does. Yes. Have you read this one, The Grail?
Oh, yes.
Is that good about the wine?
Oh, yeah.
It's a wonderful book.
Is it? Well, good.
His most recent book is a nonfiction book called The Wet Engine. It's about literally the human heart, physically and metaphorically. Brian has 3 children, 2 twin boys. One of the boys was born with only 3 chambers in his heart instead of 4. It's prompted the writing of that book. And even in something that non-lyrical, it's still very lyrical, but his writing can be tiring and somewhat breathless. But yes, he always writes like that. Sorry.
This author is very new to me, so thank you.
Yeah. So his nonfiction uses that same treats commas, punctuation in the same way, or
not quite as freely, but
it's still lyrical.
It's really, yes. I just think of it as breathless because he just goes on.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
He also has an essay in Kathleen D. Moore's latest book, Moral Grounds, and it's I guess it's fiction. Well, no, I think it's nonfiction, actually. I can't tell, really. It's almost all one sentence, and it's 2 or 3 pages. And it's wonderful. So he does often write like this.
David James Duncan does the same thing. Maybe a writer some of you have read. And I'm not sure. I wonder, is there an Irish connection? I'm not sure. He's Scottish. Oh, of course. Yeah, right. Excuse me. Yeah.
It's been a few months since I read it, and I remember having a little bit of trouble just kind of sometimes keeping the characters differentiated. But as far as the voice, I just sort of dove right in, and maybe I just read enough of Brodigan that it didn't, because he sort of seems like a Brodigan with optimism.
That's great, yeah. This book is really optimistic. Yeah.
But it's kind of, he does some of the same kinds of techniques and tricks, and the changes of voice and.
I too, at times, felt like I was losing track of who a character was. Like Nora. We read that passage. I did think hard about which one's Nora. And many characters here have many names, which has to be intentional. And what is a name, right? We say the name is the person, but there's proof. Yeah.
I actually kept a cheat sheet. I began because I was getting confused, so I kept a cheat sheet, and then when I figured out the other name, I put it by the name.
Smart,
but, once I told myself I was reading poetry, it became easier because I was kind of locked into a style I expected, and it wasn't at all.
Yeah, terrific. I did the same thing. I kept telling myself in the first pages, this is a poet's novel. And really, that's so true. It's that passage we read about Rachel and Sarah seeing each other in that reversal. Gosh, that's just poetry, isn't it? We get that whole world set up, that reality, and then it reverses at the end, sending the reverberations back through. I mean, it's poetry, absolutely.
I think epic poetry. The way, like the Icelandic. I mean, the sagas. They'll take a little section and tell you all about one person or whatever. It just kind of reminds me of it.
I haven't read enough to know.
It's a smattering of people.
Great. So, Mink River, maybe, as a way of a closing thought here, a closing argument maybe, it's a big-hearted novel. It has more empathy than 10 novels I've read recently. Every character is tenderly portrayed. We see domestic violence. We see a father beating his son repeatedly, but he is never an evil person. We don't see why he's beating his son, but we see in his own voice what the beating does to him, and we see how he beats his son because he's trying to beat himself, and that depth of empathy, is there on every page, and it's this. This is a book that I'm certainly very glad to have the chance to read. And I feel like it's really about us, as Oregon readers. We're lucky. Yeah. All right. Any last questions? Okay, well, thank you.